Hello. Have you ever felt like there's never enough? Not enough money, not enough opportunities, not enough time, or that you just do not have enough ability? That mindset is called scarcity thinking, and it quietly affects how many people live their lives. It was how I used to live my life, so I know what it's like to have that feeling of there's never enough. Today, I'm going to talk about how to break that scarcity mindset and begin thinking from faith instead of fear. Scarcity thinking doesn't just affect your finances. It affects how you see your future. It affects your confidence. It affects the decisions you make. And it affects your ability to receive. When someone lives with a scarcity mindset, they often feel like they must hold tightly to everything because if they lose something, they may not ever be able to have another opportunity like that again. But faith introduces a very different perspective. Faith says that God is not limited by what we can see. Faith says that God's sufficiency is enough for us. God says He provides for all we need according to His riches and glory. That's faith. When those truths begin to shape your thinking, your mindset starts to shift from lack to trust. Now, I'm going to talk about 3 things to break scarcity thinking. First of all, what scarcity thinking really is. Second, why it becomes so strong in people's lives. And third, how to start replacing that scarcity thinking with a mindset of trust. What scarcity thinking looks like. Scarcity thinking often shows up in subtle ways. It sounds like thoughts such as, what if I lose what I have? What if this opportunity never comes again? What if I'm not capable enough? I had better hang on to this tight because I don't know when I'm going to have more. When those thoughts repeat over and over, they shape how you see life. You begin making decisions based on fear and scarcity instead of faith in God's provision. You may hesitate to step into new opportunities. You may compare yourself constantly with others. Or you may feel like you hold tightly to everything because there might not be enough. But scarcity thinking is not always about reality. I'll say that again. Scarcity thinking is not always about reality. Often it is about perception. It's a mindset that assumes resources, opportunities, or success are extremely limited. And when that mindset grows stronger, it begins to influence every area of your life. Why scarcity thinking develops in the first place? Scarcity thinking often develops through experiences. Sometimes it comes from your upbringing, like it did mine, and how you were raised. Sometimes it comes from difficult seasons where your resources were limited. Sometimes it comes from a season where you were in survival mode. Sometimes it develops from comparison. Like, oh, I don't have enough, or I might not get enough because of what someone else has or is doing. Sometimes it comes from the feeling that opportunities are scarce. When people go through seasons of uncertainty, the mind usually tries to protect itself. So it begins to focus on what could go wrong, and it looks for possible ways where scarcity can show up in your life again. It looks for patterns. And over time, those thoughts become patterns. Those patterns of thoughts later become beliefs. And those beliefs become the driving force of how you live your life. I'm going to say that again. Those thoughts become patterns. Those patterns become beliefs, and those beliefs become the driving force of how you live your life. Here's something important to understand. Just because a thought appears often does not mean it's true. Scarcity thinking often contributes to your thinking long after the original circumstances have changed. And that's why renewing the mind is so important. You must renew your mind to truth and faith in order to break that scarcity mindset. What faith-based thinking looks like. Faith introduces a completely different perspective. Instead of focusing on limitation, faith focuses on God's sufficiency. Instead of focusing on limitation, faith focuses on God's sufficiency. It doesn't ignore the reality of your circumstances or situation, but it refuses to let fear define the future. Faith says, God can provide in ways I cannot yet see. God can open opportunities I cannot create on my own. And God is not limited by what appears possible today. That mindset brings peace to you when you have that way of thinking. Instead of living in constant fear of losing something, you begin trusting that provision will continue. And faith replaces the belief that everything is fragile and uncertain. A scarcity mindset says everything is fragile, and it might go away, everything is uncertain. And a faith says, no, not everything is fragile and uncertain. Faith builds confidence that God is able to sustain what He has started. 3 ways to break scarcity thinking. Let's talk about 3 practical shifts that help break scarcity thinking. The first shift in breaking scarcity thinking is you need to notice scarcity thoughts. Pay attention to the thoughts that repeat over and over in your mind. Thoughts like, there won't be another opportunity. I can't afford to fail. I'm not capable enough. I'm going to lose out. Recognize those thoughts helps you to challenge them. The second shift to breaking scarcity thinking is to replace fear with truth. Instead of letting fear drive your thinking, remind yourself of truth. Truth that God provides for all my needs. You could even say that out loud. God provides for all my needs. Truth that your worth is not based on comparison with others. And remind yourself of the truth that your future is not limited by today's circumstances. Your thoughts shape your perspective. And your perspective shapes your life. I'm going to say that again. Your thoughts shape your perspective, and your perspective shapes your life. So be sure to replace any fearful thoughts with thoughts of truth instead. The last shift to break scarcity thinking is to focus on taking faith-filled action. Scarcity thinking often leads to hesitation. You're scared to make a move. Faith encourages movement. Faith takes action. You may not see the entire path ahead, and it may not be clear to you which direction to take or to go in yet, but you can take action by taking the next step. Small steps of faith help to break the cycle of fear. Just focus on the next step, which is the one in front of you that you know you should take. Start there, and the scarcity mindset will shift to one of faith and trust. If you've been living with scarcity thinking, remember this: your future is not limited by your fears. God's provision is not limited by your circumstances or your situation. And when your mindset begins to shift from fear to trust, something powerful happens. You stop holding onto anxiety and fear, and you begin trusting God instead. You begin living with confidence and peace. And that shift takes time. But it begins with renewing your thinking to one of faith and trust. When you do, the scarcity mindset begins to break off of you. That is the beginning of freedom in your mind and in your life, and that is a very good place to be. If this message encouraged you, let me know in the comments, and be sure to give it a thumbs up. I want to know, have you ever struggled with scarcity thinking? If you'd like more teachings about faith, mindset, and building a life rooted in trust instead of fear, please hit that subscribe button. I have a lot more for you. I will share more along these lines in my ebook, More Than Enough, linked in the description below. In the next video, I'll talk about something many people struggle with quietly: how to trust God when you don't know what's next. So I'll see you there, and remember, I'm cheering you on.